The wind howled through the trees, biting at my skin as I trudged through the deep snow. The crunch of my boots, the only sound breaking the silence of the forest. My breath formed clouds in the frigid air, and I pulled my hood tighter, the weight of my gear dragging with every step. I had been tracking game for days, the thrill of the hunt pulling me deeper into this desolate wilderness. But today, something felt off. The usual forest sounds, the chirp of birds, the rustling of leaves, were gone. In their place, an unnatural stillness hung heavy, suffocating. I paused, scanning the snow-clad trees. Then I saw them. Two glowing orange eyes staring back at me from the shadows. I froze. And they weren't from anything I'd ever seen before. But before we start, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you'll never miss a spine-tingling episode. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to like, comment, and share the video. And if you want even more, stay connected with us on our social media platforms for more creepy content. Thank you all for being part of this journey with me. And now let's dive into the darkness together. The cold had already begun to seep into my bones as I trudged through the dense, snow-covered forest. The wind whipped through the trees, sending flurries of snow swirling in every direction, reducing visibility to almost nothing. I pulled the fur-lined hood of my coat tighter around my face, my breath coming out in visible puffs as I pushed forward, the weight of my gear growing heavier with every step. I'd been out here for days, following the trails of deer and elk through the forest, hoping to catch a glimpse of something large enough to justify the trip. The thrill of the hunt had always drawn me into the woods, the quiet solitude a welcome retreat from the world. But now, something felt different. I couldn't shake the unease gnawing at the back of my mind, like I was being watched. Though when I turned, the trees stood still, offering no answers. I had always been a seasoned outdoorsman, used to the harsh realities of nature. But as I walked deeper into the forest that day, I couldn't ignore the strange feeling creeping over me. It was as if the forest had grown quiet. Too quiet. Even the usual sounds of birds and rustling leaves were gone. The only noise was the crunch of my boots in the snow and the occasional snap of a distant tree branch. But there was something else. A feeling in the air. A tension that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I stopped for a moment to adjust my pack, scanning the surroundings. The wind howled again, making the trees groan, and I swear I heard something faint in the distance. A whisper, maybe? My heart skipped a beat. I squinted into the thickening snowfall, trying to make sense of what was out there. But then I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the snow, an illusion of shadow and falling flakes. But as I looked harder, my blood ran cold. There, just beyond the line of trees, something was moving. The shape was dark, almost formless, shifting in the blizzard like smoke caught in the wind. And then the eyes, glowing orange, like burning embers. Two orbs of unnatural light staring directly at me from the depths of the forest. They didn't blink, didn't move, just watched. My chest tightened, my instincts screaming at me to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot, as if the fear had paralyzed me. I could feel the cold air biting at my exposed skin, but it wasn't the cold that chilled me. It was the thing in the forest, lurking just out of sight, its presence suffocating. Without thinking, I reached out, my hand trembling as I instinctively tried to signal for help, though I knew, deep down, that there was no one out here, no one who could hear me. My mind raced through every possible explanation. Was it a wolf? A bear? No, it was too wrong. The thing in the distance began to move toward me, slowly at first, but with an unmistakable purpose. Its form was strange, almost shifting like it couldn't decide on a shape. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. A shadow that was alive, a being that defied the laws of nature. The snow seemed to fall around it, but not on it, as if the creature were somehow untouched by the world around it. I finally broke free from the paralysis that held me, my survival instincts kicking in. I spun around and sprinted through the snow, my legs burning with effort as I ran blindly through the woods. My mind was clouded with panic, my breath ragged as I glanced over my shoulder. The creature wasn't far behind. It was moving impossibly fast, closing the distance between us in a way that didn't make sense. The forest around me seemed to close in, the towering pines like silent watchers, their branches heavy with snow. The wind howled, almost as if it were mocking my desperation, and the creature's glowing eyes burned into the back of my mind. I stumbled, my foot catching on a tree root hidden beneath the snow. I crashed to the ground, my hand reaching out instinctively to catch myself, the cold biting into my palms as I pushed myself up. But when I looked back, it was there, right behind me. Its eyes glowed with an unholy light, and its form was now more solid, less ethereal. It was a shape I couldn't comprehend, like a human shadow, tall and thin, but with limbs that bent and twisted unnaturally. And it was grinning. I could feel it, even if I couldn't see its mouth. Its presence radiated a sense of malevolent satisfaction, as though it took pleasure in my terror. I scrambled to my feet, my legs weak, but I kept running. The snow was deep, and my boots became heavier with every step, but I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. Not with that thing chasing me. I was losing ground. I could feel it. It was too fast, too relentless. It didn't tire, didn't slow. And then, just as my lungs screamed for air, I reached the clearing. A small frozen pond lay ahead of me, the ice thin but passable. I didn't think, I just ran. But the creature was already there, waiting. It emerged from the shadows with inhuman speed, its glowing eyes burning into mine. I stopped, my heart racing, as I realized there was nowhere to run. My hand shot out in a desperate attempt to shield myself, though I knew it wouldn't help. But the thing didn't strike. Instead, it tilted its head, its form flickering like a flame in the wind, and for a brief moment, I thought it was studying me, taunting me. And then it spoke. The voice was not a voice at all. It was more of a presence, an oppressive feeling that filled my head, like a whisper that wasn't really a whisper. "You're not meant to be here." The words chilled me to my core. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. The creature's eyes grew brighter, and I could feel the cold now. Not just on my skin, but deep inside my chest, freezing the very marrow of my bones. And just as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone. Vanished into the snow, leaving only the eerie silence behind. I collapsed to the ground, my hands trembling as I tried to understand what had just happened. But there was no time to think, no time to process the terror that had just gripped me. I ran back to my camp, leaving the creature behind. But I could still feel its presence, its eyes, its voice. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The sound of snow falling, the stillness of the forest, seemed to mock me. That thing was out there, and it wasn't done with me. It was never done with me. Every February, as the snow begins to blanket the forest, my best friend Noah and I set off on a camping trip to the same remote spot. It had become a tradition, one that always felt like an escape from the noise of the world. We'd been camping and backpacking together for years, but there was something about the quiet solitude of a snowy wilderness that made it feel different, more peaceful, more personal. With the right gear, it wasn't as risky as it might seem. That is, until one year, when the forest gave us a reminder that nature is anything but predictable. This year, as we pulled up to our usual site, a place we knew like the back of our hands, everything felt familiar, almost too familiar. We set up camp quickly, hammering in tent stakes, unpacking gear, and lighting a fire to ward off the biting cold. The flames flickered in the chill evening air, and we cracked open a couple of beers, letting the warmth from the fire seep into our bones. There was something calming about the whole routine, as though the forest had become an old friend. But, as it always goes, just when you think you know a place, something unexpected happens. We were just starting to relax when the scream pierced the night. At first, I thought I'd imagined it, but then Noah's face froze, and we both sat up straighter in our chairs. It wasn't the howl of a wolf or the screech of an owl. No, this was different. It was dark, guttural, and disturbingly human, echoing across the snow-covered landscape. The sound lasted only a few seconds before the forest swallowed it up, and then, silence. For a long moment we both sat still, staring into the trees, trying to make sense of it. It sounded too far away to be anyone nearby. No way could a person be that far out in the woods this time of night. Noah, ever the optimist, shrugged it off. Must have been an animal. Some creatures make noises that sound pretty close to human, he said, trying to sound casual. Nothing to worry about. I wasn't convinced. My gut told me it was a person, but in the wilderness, things can get twisted. An animal could have been making a sound that mimicked a scream. But whatever it was, it unsettled me. For the next few minutes, we didn't speak. Instead, we exchanged nervous glances and waited, listening. But nothing came. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of pine through the air. It was as though the forest was holding its breath, waiting for something. As the last sliver of daylight dipped below the horizon, the air grew colder. The fire crackled, snapping and popping as we tossed more logs onto the flames. We tried to shake off the unease, focusing instead on making dinner. But then, just as we were beginning to relax again, it happened. The scream returned. This time it was closer, much closer. I could feel my heart rate quicken. It sounded like it came from only a couple 100 feet away, maybe even less. My breath caught in my throat. I exchanged a look with Noah, and we both knew that whatever it was, we needed to check it out before it got dark. "Let's go see what it is," I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. Noah didn't hesitate. He grabbed his knife, just in case, and we bundled up in our warmest clothes. The temperature was dropping fast, and the forest around us grew darker with every passing second. The firelight flickered behind us as we ventured into the woods, our footsteps crunching in the snow. We tried to walk carefully, not wanting to make too much noise. Every snap of a branch beneath our boots seemed deafening in the quiet wilderness. We had barely covered 150 feet when we heard the scream again. This time it was so close I swore I could feel it vibrate in my chest. I stopped dead in my tracks. I couldn't see anything through the thick trees, but the air felt wrong, charged. I glanced at Noah, and the unease in his eyes matched what I felt. Something was out there. But what? Who? We waited, standing still, listening. 5 minutes passed, though it felt like an eternity. The only sounds were our breath and the occasional rustling of the wind in the trees. Noah shifted first, taking a cautious step forward. I followed him, my hand still gripping the knife, though I wasn't sure it would do much good against whatever we were about to find. We came upon a small clearing, and there, lying in the snow, was a deer. The carcass was fresh, still warm, and the blood had soaked into the snow beneath it. My stomach churned at the sight. But that wasn't what made me freeze. A sound behind us, a shuffle of movement. My heart pounded as I turned, my eyes locking onto something across the clearing. A figure, a person. They were standing in the woods, just beyond the trees, watching us. They didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. The figure was wearing only a thin jacket, hardly enough to keep anyone warm in these temperatures. They weren't even making a sound, just observing us like some strange creature. I felt the hair on the back of my neck rise. The scream, the deer carcass, this person. Everything about the situation was wrong. Noah's hand gripped my shoulder, his touch firm and urgent. Without a word, we turned and bolted back to our camp. The only sounds were our breath, the crunch of snow underfoot, and the pounding of my heart in my chest. Back at the campsite, we didn't speak. We didn't need to. Fear hung in the air between us, thick and suffocating. We packed our gear quickly, in tense silence, not even bothering to check that everything was in its place. We didn't care about the details. We just needed to leave. We didn't look back. We didn't even pause to check if the figure had followed us. By the time we got everything packed, we were already halfway down the trail, moving fast, not stopping until we reached the car. The drive back was just as silent, the weight of what had happened hanging over us like a dark cloud. We never figured out who or what was out there in the woods. Was the scream connected to that strange figure? Was it someone else entirely? The questions stayed with us, unanswered and unsettling. But we knew one thing for sure. We would never return to that campsite, not after what we had seen. The forest had been our refuge, but that night, it had turned into something else. Something we couldn't understand, and we had no intention of tempting fate by going back. We found a new spot for our next trip, one that didn't come with the weight of that haunting memory. Whatever we'd encountered out there, we hoped it stayed far away from us, never to be seen again. My older sibling and I had always loved playing in the snow. We lived on the outskirts of town, near a thick forest, where we would often run and play during the winter months. The area was isolated enough that our parents felt comfortable letting us venture out into the woods, especially on snowy evenings. Our family wasn't exactly secretive about where we lived, but I won't mention any specific details, town or state, because that's not important to the story. What matters is the events that transpired one fateful winter night, events that still haunt me to this day. It all started on one of those snowy evenings when the wind howled outside, and the sky was thick with snowflakes. Our parents, after some convincing, allowed us to go outside to play. The blizzard made everything feel magical, like a different world altogether. We were both eager to make the most of it, so we decided to play a game of hide and seek, but with a twist. The thick snow was the perfect canvas for leaving footprints, so we figured that it would add an interesting element to the game. As the seeker, my brother would have to find me not just by sound or sight, but by following the trail of prints I left behind. We grabbed our flashlights, and he agreed to be the seeker first. I ran out ahead of him, determined to find the perfect hiding spot. We both knew the woods well, having spent countless hours exploring it, so getting lost was never a concern. But that night, with the snow falling steadily, the familiar woods felt different, almost eerie, as if they were hiding something from us. I found a quiet spot between two massive trees, and once I crouched down, I turned off my flashlight to avoid giving away my position. The snow around me was deep, so I tried my best to cover my footprints, but there was only so much I could do. I wasn't a professional tracker after all. Soon enough, I spotted the faint beam of my brother's flashlight in the distance, moving toward me. I knew he was getting closer, and I had to act fast. With a quick glance over my shoulder, I bolted into the woods, hoping to lose him in the darkness. My heart raced as I ran, my breath coming out in visible puffs of white against the cold night air. I could no longer see his flashlight, but I wasn't sure if he had turned it off, or if I had simply outpaced him. Either way, I knew I had gained some ground. I continued deeper into the woods, not stopping to look back. The trees were close together, their branches heavy with snow. I was familiar with the terrain, so I wasn't worried about losing my way. I kept walking, my boots crunching against the snow with each step, when I noticed something strange ahead. Another set of footprints. At first, I thought they were my brother's. Maybe he had run past me without me noticing. But then, as I got closer, I realized these footprints weren't mine or his. They were too fresh, too deliberate, as if someone had just passed through moments ago. They were boot prints, not animal tracks. That realization made my blood run cold. Who else could be out here in the middle of a blizzard, in the dead of night? My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to follow the trail. I told myself it was probably just another lost soul, maybe someone else looking to escape the storm. But as I moved further, I started to grow uneasy. The prints led me deeper into the woods, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone anymore. I began to hear strange sounds in the distance, rustling in the trees, the crack of a branch breaking underfoot. But I tried to push it out of my mind. It was just my imagination, I told myself. But then, I saw something odd sticking out of the snow near the boot prints. It was dark and out of place against the whiteness of the snow. It took me a moment to recognize it, but then I realized it was a black garbage bag, partially buried in the snow. My stomach twisted, and an unpleasant odor wafted through the air, unmistakably foul. I was hoping, desperately hoping, that it was just a bag of trash left behind by someone. But even as I approached it, I had a sinking feeling that something wasn't right. I knelt down to inspect the bag, brushing some of the snow off to get a better look. The bag was heavy, and it felt wrong in my hands. My heart pounded as I struggled to open it, not knowing what I was about to uncover. I finally tore the bag open with my bare hands, unable to contain my growing sense of dread. The instant I saw what was inside, I recoiled in horror. A decomposing human body. The sight of it made my stomach churn. I gagged loudly, my body reacting before my mind could process what I was seeing. I coughed, unable to stop the forceful convulsions, my chest tight with the shock and horror of it all. The body was in an advanced state of decay, the skin pale and mottled, and the stench was overpowering. I could barely breathe from the sheer disgust. It was too much to process. In my panic, I think I made more noise than I realized. My brother, hearing the commotion, must have heard me because soon his flashlight beam was shining in my direction. I saw him approach, his face puzzled as he tried to make sense of what I was doing. I immediately waved at him, signaling for him to leave, to run back home. But he didn't understand at first. His confusion was evident as he continued moving toward me. That's when I ran up to him, frantic, grabbing his arm and urging him to turn off the flashlight. I pointed at the bag, and in a whisper, I told him what I had found. At first, he didn't believe me. Who would? It sounded impossible. But when he saw the body for himself, his face went pale, and I saw the realization hit him. He covered his mouth in shock, and then, without saying a word, he started ushering me away, guiding me back toward the house. We moved quietly, both of us glancing over our shoulders, our footsteps barely making a sound in the thick snow. But as we walked, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise. I kept hearing something behind us, the sound of footsteps crunching in the snow. We quickened our pace, the flashlight still glowing in my brother's hand, but we didn't dare turn around. Then, at some point, we both heard it again. A footstep. Another. We turned back together, our breaths visible in the cold night, and what we saw sent us into a full sprint. About 50 feet away, in the dim light of my brother's flashlight, stood a man. He was just standing there, watching us, silent. We couldn't see his face clearly, but his figure was unmistakable. He wasn't someone we knew. We didn't wait to see what would happen next. We bolted through the snow, the sound of our footsteps pounding in our ears as we raced toward home. The man yelled something at us, but we couldn't make out his words. It didn't matter. We didn't stop. When we got home, we rushed inside, our hearts still pounding. We told our parents everything, and they immediately called the police. The officers arrived soon after, asking us about the body, our location, and the man we had seen. They sent out a search team to look for the body, but they didn't make us go back out there that night. We gave them our best description, and they promised to investigate further. The search the next day turned up nothing. No body, no trace of the man. But the search continued, and eventually they asked us to help retrace our steps. We did our best, but the body was never found. There was no way to know if the person who had left it there had moved it once they realized there were witnesses. We were just kids, scared and unsure of what had really happened that night. To this day, I can't help but wonder if we were being followed, if the person who had hidden the body had been watching us the entire time. Did we narrowly escape? I'll never know for sure. But I haven't forgotten the eerie feeling that clung to the woods that night, or the chilling image of that man standing in the dark, watching us. I don't know if the body was ever recovered, but I still wonder if someone, or something, was waiting for us to come back. If you've experienced a terrifying event or have a horror story to tell, we at AG Horrors want to hear from you. Share your experiences with us on Reddit, and let's uncover the mysteries hiding in the shadows together. And if you want to support the channel and help us bring even more terrifying content, consider checking out our support options on Patreon or Ko-fi. Your support means the world to us. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more spine-chilling stories like this one. And now, stay tuned for the next horror episode.